Hey everybody, welcome back to another Meaningful Monday live stream. I'm Drew Biharla, for those of you who don't know me. But I hope folks are joining and enjoying the show so far. It's been fun to make these, and I love doing these things. So I hope you guys will drop your comments in the comment section below when you guys are done. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you don't, please feel free to leave a comment why. Today we're talking about intent versus impact. Now, this is something I had a conversation with a coaching colleague of mine last week about, and she mentioned it was something that we might want to cover in my conversation. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit and see how folks feel about this kind of thing. This has been extremely relevant in the last year, especially, but over time, it's relevant always, honestly, but it's been extremely visible in the public eye for the last year or so with all of the diversity conversations. But it is a bigger concept than just diversity. The reason intent and impact is extremely powerful. Well, let me first back up and explain what it is. So the idea is that it's a polarity, essentially. You have the intent on one side and you have impact on the other, right? Doesn't matter if someone has good intentions if the impact is still really bad. For example, with microaggressions, talking about situations where with racial divides and racial dynamics. If a white person says something that offends a black person, and is it possible it doesn't matter what their intent was when they said what they said. Now, obviously, I submit that there's a continuum, right? Where obviously you say something like the N-word, which is over here on the extreme level of whether they definitely should have known, and they need to not use that word, obviously. And then over here, a microaggression that they may not even know, which is just talking about things that may allude to white privilege, which they may or may not be aware of. Now, aware of white privilege is one thing, but being aware of things that allude to white privilege is a whole nother level of awareness, right? So where on that continuum is it okay to consider impact intent over impact, and where in that continuum is it okay to just say, you know what, it's a strict liability type situation, to use a legal term, right? Which is just the thing happened and that person is guilty. Now, the reason I connected to legal is because there's a similar concept in the law, which is called the Eggshell Skull plaintiff, right? And that's in tort law. And I'm not here to teach you law at this moment, but I want to bring it up just because it's valid. The defendant must take full responsibility for all damages that they cause, regardless of the fact that the plaintiff was more susceptible than average. Now, this came up essentially in a tort case where someone they're roughhousing, having fun, whatever, playing around or something, and someone pushed the other person, they fell, and because their skull happened to be much more fragile than the average person's skull, they suffered severe damages to their brain, to their head, and their skull. And that person was held liable because it doesn't matter what the intent essentially transfers, right? It doesn't matter what the intent was. The action still happened, that caused that injury, and that person was found to be guilty of that tort, of that situation. Now, how much of that, first of all, ask question, is that fair, right? Is it fair that unforeseen circumstances are what we're holding liability for, right? Is it foreseeable that, or does it matter that it's foreseeable that someone is impacted negatively by your words? And I say that there's a continuum, right? If someone comes to you and says something like, hey, what's going on? I went with friends last night and we had a couple drinks and hung out. Now, if that person is a recovering alcoholic, for example, right, and they are still very much in recovery and they're trying to get away from alcohol, and your mentioning of alcohol is a trigger for them, and you have no idea that that's the case, are you responsible for triggering that person? That's the question that I wonder, right? And that's the same thing as an intent as that the intent is not there to trigger that person. The intent is not there to offend or get that person to the point where they are going to hurt themselves or cause harm for themselves or cause harm in general. But the action is an innocuous one, right? Now, obviously, when it comes to diversity conversations and conversations around race, it's a little more obvious when things like that are happening, but it's obvious to some of us. It's not always obvious to all of us. Again, shifting the example a little bit, if you grew up in a completely all black neighborhood and you are okay saying whatever conversations you have with all black folks, and then you go into a conversation with someone who doesn't know you, and you are just acting the way you act with your friends normally, and someone gets offended by that, is that okay? Is that something where that person is justified in being offended? And should they take your intent into consideration? My submission is that it's okay that they're offended. It's totally fine. You can't control whether people are offended or not. And we can't control whether we're offended or not. But how you handle it is what matters, right? How you handle that being offended is what makes a difference. What makes the difference between what makes that reaction right or wrong, or appropriate or inappropriate, I should say, not right or wrong, right? If you go to that person and say, hey, listen, when you said X, Y, and Z, here's how that I received that, right? You turn it into a conversation rather than just offense. That's where the difference is between handling it maturely and moving the needle forward, as opposed to turning it into a big offending situation where it's just going to blow up and get worse and worse, right? Where people are afraid of saying things, which doesn't make any sense. Because we shouldn't be afraid of saying things unless we know that thing is going to be offensive to someone, right? We don't need to say those kind of things. If we know something's going to be offensive to somebody, then why say it? If it's obvious, like the N-word, for example, then you can infer that person did not have good intent when they said it, depending on the context of what they said and who they are, right? You can understand that person probably had poor intent. But if something a little more innocuous, like, again, microaggressions, pointing that out to that person is going to be as effective as a way of dealing with that as possible, and doing it in not an offensive attacking way, but addressing it up front, directly and assertively is probably the best way to deal with it. On the flip side, if you're a white person who's looking to find out more about what you can and can't say, right? And you go to a person of color, one, it's not their responsibility to teach you anything. So let's start with that, right? Putting that responsibility on them is not fair. We've had these discussions as people of color. We've had discussions since we were born, right? So forcing us to make these conversations normal with other people in general more than we want to have them is not fair. However, if we don't have the discussion with people who are not with white people, no one else will have those discussions, right? I mean, how else are they going to learn? We're immersed in this every single day. We're living this life where we are immersed in our worlds of being people of color, of living the life of someone as a person of color. So if we can't convey that to someone else, they're living the life of being someone who's white. They can't perceive life as a person of color. It's impossible. It's impossible for us to perceive life as a person of white descent as well, right? We are all submerged in our own water. We're living life through our own lenses, right? If you ask a fish, how's the water? What are they going to tell you? They're going to say, what water? Because they're not living in water as far as they're concerned, right? That's just the only world that they've ever known. So while it's not our responsibility as people of color to have these discussions, to educate people who are white about these experiences, there's also no one else to do it, right? And there's also no other way for them to actually understand what it's like being a person of color, or at least attempt to understand that. Now, on the flip side, if someone who's white uses good intentions, that's example how when someone uses good intentions as an excuse, if someone says that they had good intentions and it's clearly an excuse, again, it's at a certain level you have to take people at their word. If they say if there's plausible deniability and they probably could have had good intentions in your experiences with them over time, there's no indication that they would ever have poor intentions. And the key is, though, that they really want to understand. They're coming to you with real curiosity after the fact. If they just said, "Oh, it was just good intentions. I never had bad intentions," and they leave it at that, they're probably just trying to get out of it. It's probably an excuse, right? It probably is just an excuse. But the difference between an excuse and reason is that they're really trying to understand. They're like, hey, help me understand what was offensive about that, or how do I understand that better? And again, you may or may not be in the mindset to have that conversation with them. And if you're not, you don't have to. There's no obligation to do that. You can just let them know that, look, I'm not the person to ask about that. I don't want to have this discussion right now. I'm not comfortable having it. You can please go ask someone else. And as long as you do it in a respectful way, and they're respectful to you in return, that person can move on and do that. But if the white person in the situation is coming to you to ask these questions, not out of curiosity, but out of just a sense of guilt and a sense of wanting to assuage that guilt and hear from them hear from someone of color that don't worry, they're a good person. You're not one of those bad ones. You're a good one. And that's also just messed up. That's also not the way to handle this kind of things, right? Those are the kind of, if that's why you want to have the discussion, if that's why you want to talk about this kind of stuff as a white person, just don't talk about it. Just ignore it. Just move on and continue on life the way it is right now, because that is not fair to the person of color to have to reassure you that you're a good person. You have to know in your heart that you're a good person or not. We all do, right? And not to say that the people of color are any level above or below anything. Everyone is at the same level, but we all have different experiences that we are comfortable sharing, and some that we're not, right? And sometimes something you say will trigger someone else, and that person has every right to say, I'm not in a position to talk right now. I don't feel like talking. I don't really want to talk about this. This affected me, and I'm not ready to deal with this or with you. On the flip side, the person who is affected by that has a way to deal with it. They have a way to react that's appropriate and inappropriate, I should say, right? And lashing out at someone is not fair to that person. Unless you can pretty much put together that they intended to hurt you or intended to cause that kind of reaction. So that's one thing I want to talk about with intent versus impact. It's a really important concept to consider, because it's just, you can't assume that people are always have positive or negative intentions, right? You have to really dig deeper almost every single time, unless you know who they are, unless they've proven to you who they are. It's not fair to assume anything, right? When you assume, you make an ass of you and me. It's very true. But as long as someone's coming to you with genuine curiosity and genuine desire to be better, consider that. Take that into account. It's not like it's not like you have to educate them. You don't have to take your time and your effort and your energy to explain to someone what they want to know necessarily. But it's helpful to do that. Absolutely. And what other questions do we have coming in? Anything else? Setting your intention. Okay, shifting gears, setting intention in terms of mindfulness. So basically, setting your intentions is a very general thing. Let me clarify. It can be general or it can be very specific, right? Your intentions are, what do you want right now? What is your goal? What is your hope, right? And you can know exactly what you want, or you can know generally what you want. But the idea is just kind of focus on that as you're doing your mindfulness practice. Really visualize for yourself what it looks like to achieve that thing that you want to achieve, or to be that thing you want to be. If you take that time and really breathe into that and really focus on that and drown out all the noise, your brain's going to start charting a path to get you where you want to be, to get you to the place where you're going towards in the direction you want to go. Now, setting your intentions also in the context of intent versus impact is a little bit different, right? And we're talking about intention, weighing that against the impact it has on other people. Now, when you're talking about setting your intentions in terms of mindfulness, that may or may not consider other people in the mix. I mean, ideally, what you want to accomplish doesn't necessarily hurt anyone, right? If it does, then you might want to rethink what you're trying to accomplish. But if you're trying to set your intentions in terms of intent versus impact, it's valuable to consider the impact, positive or negative, on people around you, on people in your life, on the world, really, depending on how big your audience is. Hope that helps with the question. How can I take a look at myself and see if my actions or intent may hurt or offend others? It's a good question. First of all, you're limited. This question limits you to what you know. So you don't know what you don't know, right? So based on what you already know, based on what you've researched and what you've experienced in your life, essentially, you can ask yourself, who might be offended by what I'm about to say, right? Or what I'm about to do. On the flip side, the question is, do you care, right? Is that level of sensitivity reasonable to you, and reasonable in a more general, or let's see, what's the word I'm looking for, in a more acceptable space? Like, is it acceptable in general, right? A situation where it's racially motivated, probably be more sensitive than others, right? In situations like some of these comedy skits or things where people are getting cancel culture and people are getting offended by otherwise, jokes that are literally purely jokes that are not racially motivated truly, or motivated to really hurt anyone. That's a little different, right? If you're a comedian, I mean, the rules are a little different when you're talking about jokes. And I tend to lean towards everyone has their own personal view about these kind of things. I tend to lean towards the Ricky Gervais mode, which you can make fun of pretty much anything. Nothing's off the table. And as long as you know that you're not living that, you're not saying this, you're making fun of everything equally. You're not saying that everything, that one particular group sucks and the other group is amazing. You're just, because there's things to make fun of in every situation, frankly. There's things to make fun of about every group of people, every group of individuals. And as long as you do that openly and equally, that's what real equality looks like, right? When you normalize making fun of everyone and everyone having a good time, that's when things are actually truly normal. That's when everything is really truly normal. When you make something out of bounds, like, oh, that's too much, that's too far, then that thing becomes elevated or demoted, depending on how you look at it. Right? It becomes that becomes the untouchable thing. You can't go after that thing because that's too sacred. There's too, it's different. It's alienated from everything else. It's separate. Cancel culture too harsh. Good question. I don't like cancel culture. I think it's stupid. So yes, I do think it's too harsh. Hey Tasha. Oh hey Pam. Sorry, I didn't see you guys. Hey Pammy. Hey Tasha. No worries. Drive safe. Don't watch. Just listen. I'm glad you're listening. Thanks for tuning in. No, cancel culture sucks. I think it's stupid. I think the idea. I'm sorry. I'm back up. It depends on why. I think canceling or intentionally boycotting certain things because of what they stand for example, Jeffrey Epstein and things like that. Absolutely. I think it's appropriate to cancel those, to be in a situation where you're saying, okay, those people, that kind of, I can't stand behind those kind of things. But in terms of canceling comedians or here's another one, Gina Carano, right? She's become a very big topic conversation in terms of being, highly debated, whether she's a good person or a bad person. And it started, to my knowledge, I may not know the whole story, but what I know from so far is, first of all, her tweets are generally accepting of most people and of everyone, really, just like about love and acceptance and like being out there and being who you are and owning who you are. But she got a lot of flack because she didn't put the he, she, or she, her after her name, right? In solidarity for trans and LGBTQ folks. I don't think that's fair to her, frankly. I think it's a choice, and just because she didn't put it doesn't mean that she should be, treated unfairly, treated poorly because of that, right? So she's been a victim of cancel culture in some ways. Oh, James, hey, welcome to the show. Thanks, man. What is cancel culture? Cancel culture is where basically people don't like what someone said. Typically a comedian, an actor, actress, some public figure. They don't like what they said or what they've done, and so they basically try to make it a big deal and they blow up their spot about it. And they're like, oh, that person said this. So that means that they're in the case of Gina Carano, she's a transphobe or she's against trans people. She doesn't stand behind LGBTQ plus rights, right? That's the conclusion. So they draw that conclusion and then they make it a big deal. And then everyone gets behind that and tries to make it so that they're unhireable, right? It's basically almost like like Colin Kaepernick, for example, was canceled by the NFL, right? Because he knelt for the national anthem, and so now the entire NFL wants to blackball him, right? Essentially blacklisting from the public perspective. That's what a cancel culture is. And so Gina Carano was like, didn't put those pronouns behind her name, and now she's gotten a lot of flack for that. In my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, but I think that's something that's a choice. It's like, if you want to stand for that, then yes, please, by all means, go for it. Put those pronouns behind your name. But saying that someone doesn't support you because they didn't put the pronouns behind your name, it's just not true. If they choose not to, that they can, doesn't mean they're against you. It just means that they don't want to say that. Why? If you pressure someone into doing that, isn't that kind of not what you're going for? Like if you're guilting someone into doing that and they do it just because they feel guilty, is that achieving anything? That doesn't further your cause at all, right? If anything, it actually push people against your cause to be like, okay, well, if that's how people are who support that, then I don't want to be like those people, right? I don't want to be associated with those people who treat people that way because of a choice. Now, if they go the other way and say, screw trans people or anything like that, that's when you can actually say, forget that person. That person is not someone we want to support at all, right? Do you think we have harsher standards for celebrities than regular people when thinking about cancel culture? Yes and no. I think that it's a great question, but I think yes and no. I think the one thing that I would say is that people tend to go after celebrities more because it'll get them more notoriety. And what I mean by that is if a celebrity, let's say they make a mistake and it could otherwise any normal person would be considered that would be considered a normal mistake for, the celebrity would be held to a higher standard only because that person is going to make it worse in order to become famous or become more famous, really, essentially, to get more views, get more popularity. The case of Aziz Ansari comes to mind, and that whole thing where he was accused of rape or sexual assault or acting inappropriately. Honestly, I read the girl's description of what happened, that the young lady's description of what went down that night. It just sounded like a bad date. Like he just doesn't know how to operate. I mean, he never forced himself upon her. He obviously, stopped when she said stop, and he ended up calling an Uber to go home, and nothing happened with them. That, I mean, if she felt uncomfortable, and she even said herself she didn't think it was like that, but then her friends were insisting that it was a sexual assault, and I mean, that's not something that just sounded like a really, really bad date. Like it was just really stupid and bad. I mean, I've had much worse situations happen on the flip side of things, like where I was on the side of the person pushing away someone, right? And I mean, not that my experience is definitive, but my point is that wouldn't have been as big a deal if Aziz wasn't a celebrity, right? If she wasn't someone, if she didn't stand to gain some notoriety from that, if she didn't stand to gain some kind of popularity from just promoting that and being like, oh yeah, Aziz Ansari assaulted me, it's a bigger deal because it's a bigger fish to catch. Because like, oh, we want to catch this person in action. I also think it was a bigger deal because he's brown, but it's a different conversation. But yes, to answer your question, I think we do have. I don't think harsher standards, but I think it's a higher likelihood people will go after people who are celebrities more so than regular people. Are actions more important than intention? So I don't think that they're more important than intention. I think it depends on which side of things you are. It always depends. I think intentions matter to a point, but if your actions go against your intentions, or if your actions do speak louder than words and definitely speak louder than intentions. So if your intentions are good and your actions are against those intentions, then obviously it doesn't matter what your intentions were. If your actions are in alignment with your intentions and they still affect someone in a negative way, how you handle it is what makes a difference at that point. Again, the reaction on both sides is what matters. So if you react as essentially an asshole and like, look, I don't care what you think. I don't care what you said. What I said was X, Y, and Z, and what I did was this. So screw you for being sensitive. Then you're just being an asshole. Now, if you're saying, hey, I'm really sorry, and I didn't mean that wasn't how I meant it, and I'm curious, I'd love to know more about why that offended you, or what offended you about that, or how that affected you. And you really genuinely want to know, and because you genuinely want to change your behavior and make sure that you're aware of that for next time in case there is a next time, that makes a difference, right? That's again an action, but it's putting your actions behind your intentions, right? On the flip side, on the person who is offended, again, if your reaction is not in alignment with what actually happened, if you react hugely and you just blow up at someone at an otherwise minor infraction situation, or you're just especially triggered by something, and you don't catch it in the moment, how you handle it matters as well, right? You don't just get carte blanche to deal with it however you want to because you're essentially triggered by that. I mean, people are people. People make mistakes, and if we don't acknowledge someone else making a mistake, then we can't expect to be acknowledged when we make a mistake. So if you treat that person like crap after that and write them off completely after that one scenario or that one situation, then that's telling about you as well, right? So I'm not saying in the moment you gotta maintain control at all times. That is the goal, ideally, if you work on yourself. But just take that into account. Take the other person's actual intentions into account, if possible, because otherwise it's not fair to anyone on either side. So I don't think actions are more important. I think it's got to be a balancing act at all times. It's tough. I'm not saying it's easy. Can you have action without intention? Will that result in a negative outcome? No, not really. I mean, outcomes, whether the outcome is negative or positive, depends on what your intention was, right? So if you have an action without any intention, if you just act and don't think about it, then how can the how can the outcome be negative or positive, right? Negative or positive depends on how it affects your intention. Now, in terms of other people, yes, you can absolutely have a negative outcome for other people if you don't take into account what's going to happen, what as a result of your actions, what your actions will cause as a chain reaction type thing. But if you just act and don't think about it, then reaction is necessarily, I mean, it won't definitely result in a negative outcome, but it could. I mean, it's a higher chance just because you haven't considered, you're just acting recklessly at that point. So I would say always try to keep some kind of intention behind your actions. Don't just act without thinking about it. Any other questions coming up? Hope this was a fun one. Yeah, this was it's a little bit all over the place. I feel like, sorry if it was, but I think it's important to talk about these things. And I think the ultimate question to ask is, you know, do the intentions outweigh the impact and or vice versa? Because either one can be the controlling factor in a situation. It's really got to be weighed on a situation by situation basis, right? Is the person really approaching with genuine curiosity? And then the reaction also matters, right? So it's really it's a situation by situation basis. There's no blanket like, oh, intention is always more important than impact or vice versa. It can't be. There's no such thing as absolutes when it comes to human dynamics, right? Or behavior, or how things affect us in our heads. We can be having a really bad day, and something that would not otherwise impact us at all would just cause us to blow up like a volcano, right? That just happens sometimes. So is that fair? Is it fair that someone needs to take that into account? Is this person having a bad day? Is this person doing this? Like, no, I joke with my friends all the time and vice versa. And I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. I'm offended by what he said or what she said. They're my friends, and I know that ultimately they're not going to be a situation where they intentionally want to hurt me. If they do say something that crosses a line, I will let them know, and that's my responsibility to let them know where the line is. Especially when you're meeting someone earlier on in a relationship, right? You got to draw the boundaries. They have to know where it's okay to operate, and if there's a place where you're creating essentially rules of engagement, and if those rules of engagement are violated at any point in time, and you set them clearly in the beginning or at any point in time, then you can hold them accountable, right? But again, I'm reminded by this quote comes up for me a lot, but the path to resentment is paved by the request that was never made, right? If you never tell someone what you expect of them, you can't hold them accountable for violating what you expect of them, for not living up to those expectations. You can't. It's not fair to that person. Not fair to you. It's not fair to them. Right. And then being upset at them and never communicating that to them, never letting them know why you're upset at them, being just hating them for no reason, is like drinking poison, hoping that they die. That doesn't help you at all. It doesn't help them either. So you owe it to yourself and you owe it to them to have the conversations. And they may not be tough. It may not be easy conversations. They're probably going to be tough conversations, but they will make you stronger and they'll make you better and make them better as well and help them be more educated. So we are actually at 30 minutes almost, but I want to give folks a chance to ask questions if they have them. I know Tasha's driving. James is tuned in. Thanks for tuning in, James. Pammy, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to post them in the comments section below. But if not, thank you guys for tuning in today. Hope this was a good one for you. Let me know any topics you guys want to cover in the future weeks. I'll be talking about more stuff. And we did announce the winner for our raffle for the Zenit Journal, and that was Dr. Klein with Got Your Back Foundation, and so he wins the free journal. And yes, Crucial Conversations, Rahul, thanks for tuning in, man. Crucial Conversations is a great book to read, to check it out. And folks who want to check that out, please check it out. It's on Amazon. It's also an Audible book, audio. So great resource there for folks who want to check that out. But thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, please hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube later. Hit the comment button if you want to leave any questions or comments. Let me know what you guys want to see, what topics you want to talk about in the future, leadership, coaching, leadership coaching, dynamics, anything, business, whatever you guys want to talk about. Happy to talk about it later. But thanks. Take care, guys. Happy Monday. Have a great week, and I will see you guys on Thursday for our live stream. Who wrote it? That's a great question. I'm horrible with authors. James, I'm really bad with names of people I see. I know faces really well. I know book titles pretty well. I don't know authors very well. But I can look it up for you. 1 second. Let me check real quick. It is by Al Switzler, Joseph Grenny, and Ron McMillan. So we'll have that. We can put that actually into the description of the video on YouTube. Hannah, if you could do that when you get a chance. When we post this, we'll put that in the description so folks can have that resource. And we can put a link to it on Amazon as well. So cool. Thank you guys so much. And take care. Stay safe. And I'll talk to you guys on Wednesday for